The Hill Rising did a sort of panel discussion in response to some comments by Bill Maher in Variety magazine. Now, Bill Maher, has been on the sort of anti-woke beat for quite some time on his show. He's really centered that for as long as he's had a TV show. I mean, his first TV show was called Politically Incorrect.
Right.
So he's always been a sort of shit talker in that way.
It's kind of his face, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That has sort of taken on a different tone in recent years because I think his politics have somewhat shifted in recent years. He went from being someone in 2015, 2016 who never really advocated full-throatedly for the Bernie Sanders candidacy, but he did tell Bernie on his show that he hopes he wins, and so that was a quasi-endorsement of sorts.
Right.
And then, a year and a half later, he was eyeballing Amy Klobuchar because he thought that she was the best candidate. So he has drifted to the right from a policy standpoint, too. And that has given his sort of anti-woke screeds, I think, a slightly different character. And so we're going to get into that now, but I do want to play this clip. This was a 15-minute clip. We're not going to play the whole thing. We have about 5 minutes worth. I did speed up the video a tad just so we're not sitting here playing another channel's content for 10 minutes because we don't want to do that, unlike
some people we know.
Unlike some people we know. Give you
Yeah.
There we go. Exactly. Right. That's not our game. So we are going to play this in pieces, and what I think we should do, Russell, is react to each individual take as it plays. Right? So we'll just sort of pause it along the way.
I agree.
Because otherwise it's just going to be too much.
There's a lot to unpack there, yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot to unpack. So we will unpack this piece by piece, like Christmas morning.
During an interview in Variety magazine, he was asked, what do you view as the Democrats' biggest problem heading into 2024? And he responded, the biggest problem with the Democrats is their woke baggage. I think the Democrats could easily win every election if they didn't do the kind of thing that makes people go, oh my God, this is the party of no common sense. Stop talking about pregnant men and stuff that makes people go, who are these people? What are they talking about? Men don't get pregnant. It's the stuff that makes them very vulnerable because it's very close to home.
How much do you think that this is really an issue that Democrats are actually, let's say, talking about pregnant men? Or how much of that is a fictionalized reality that's been created by these kinds of media conversations? Let's start with you, Abby.
Okay, so first up, for those who don't know, this is Abby Martin from the Empire Files. She's up first.
I do tend to think that it is mostly a fictionalized narrative that is perpetuated by this kind of cyclical nature of the corporate media and kind of the gossipy entertainment aspect of corporate media, where you have the liberal media, reacting to right-wing media and the right-wing media reacting to the liberal media. And so I think that, people on the street, I feel like this is not on the forefront of their minds, but Fox News making it so hysterical and then the liberal media reacting to that hysteria just becomes its own industry. And so people like Bill Maher, he's a very rich, old white man. And it's kind of insulting to hear him just say, we should be catering more and more to the right wing and basically ceding ground to the right wing just because this has been blown out of proportion. I mean, that's his whole position anyway. And that's, I would say, the biggest problem with Democrats is not the woke baggage. It's the fact that they cede ground to the right wing over and over again. And that's exactly what Bill Maher does when he has people on like Ann Coulter, who he buddies up to constantly. It's quite insulting to hear this coming from him saying, oh, gender and all these issues, we shouldn't get too personal. Yeah, okay, when a federal ban on abortion is on the table. All right, dude, I know that this doesn't affect you, but it actually affects a lot of people in this country.
Yeah, I think that point about...
All right.
All right.
A lot just in that clip alone. A lot. So go ahead, Russell, if you want to take a stab at it.
Okay. She's wrong in many regards here. People who...
I don't think she's wrong in all regards. I'll throw that out for now. I think she's wrong about a lot, but not about everything. So anyway, go ahead. I'm not
okay.
Step on your segment. I just want to set up a little bit of
This is what she's not wrong about. She's not wrong that their biggest problem is that they keep moving to the right. She's not wrong about that. That's their biggest problem. She is wrong in minimizing this as it may very well be media created. I would agree that the average person is not walking around obsessing on questions of gender politics and that kind
A
of stuff.
trans with a Schmendrick swinging it in a girl's bathroom.
Exactly. Most are not Mr. Savage obsessing on this. But what she said there is very out of touch, as these people tend to be. And it's always disappointing to me to see progressive journalists like Abby Martin, who I do respect, who at the same time have swallowed a lot of the woke stuff that Maher is speaking out against. So much so that she does not realize, and this is only the one of two times in this sequence that they call out Bill Maher as a rich old white man, as if, and this is a trick that the wokesters often pull, particularly, well, I mean, they're pretty much all elites. They try to make it as if being anti-woke is the elite position and being woke is the with the people position. And studies showed that is not at all true. Vast majorities of the American public hate wokeness. And in fact, there was a great study done a few years back, very comprehensive, 9,000 people interviewed, half-hour interviews, broke down the overall affiliations and political beliefs of Americans. So I'm going to read a little bit from that. There was an article in The Atlantic that covered this. Whites are ever so slightly less likely than average to believe that political correctness is a problem in the country. 79% of them share this sentiment. Instead, it is Asians, 82%, Hispanics, 87%, and American Indians, 88%, who are most likely to oppose political correctness. So I'm stepping away from the article here. So who are the people who really adhere to this? All right. 83% of respondents who make less than $50,000 dislike political correctness. Just 70% of those who make more than $100,000 are skeptical about it. And while 87% who have never attended college think that political correctness has grown to be a problem, only 66% of those with a postgraduate degree share that sentiment. And here's what really drives it home. So what does this group look like? Compared with the rest of the nationally representative polling sample, progressive activists are much more likely to be rich, highly educated, and white. They are nearly twice as likely as the average to make more than $100,000 a year. They are nearly 3 times as likely to have a postgraduate degree. And while 12% of the overall sample in the study is African American, only 3% of progressive activists are. With the exception of the small tribe of devoted conservatives, progressive activists are the most racially homogeneous group in the country. So everything that Abby Martin is saying here, not everything, but a lot of it, is bullshit. This is a pose that people who want to defend these positions take, that they're with the people and the people of color. No, they're with the elite, highly educated, white members of society. Now, she also attacks Maher on having Ann Coulter on when they're addressing an article in which he was specifically asked about that, and they never take on his argument. And his argument is, in brief, as follows. They ask him, many argue that these people have dangerous opinions and that it's irresponsible to give them a platform on your show. How do you respond to that? And his response was, I don't agree with it. Platforming, it's a form of censorship. It's a form of clamping down on free speech. I don't think we teach civics or history anymore. So I don't think a lot of people, especially the younger generation, even understand free speech or why it's so important. What they have been steeped in is sensitivity and not having to endure too many moments where they encounter something that they don't already agree with or that makes them uncomfortable. That is not what college should be. It's not what the free press should be. So they never take that on. They never argue with that. They just elide that entire point. So I think the points she's making there are dishonest. And okay, I did go back and take a look at what you were talking about, where apparently he said on his show that abortion doesn't affect him. So that's what she's referencing. She is still conflating the term gender and the way that Bill Maher would attack it with that statement in a way that's ultimately dishonest. When Bill Maher is talking about gender, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about something else.
No, that's true. I didn't mean it in that way. Look, where I think she's coming from, for the most part, like, I don't hear her in that clip really making a full-throated defense of the woke ideas themselves. You know, I mean, I think she probably subscribes to them more so than the average Joe on the street, the average Joe or Jane or whoever. You know, you read off those numbers. I buy all those numbers. I reject woke discourse for the most part myself. But the other thing I think she gets right here is she does have Bill Maher pegged when she says that Bill Maher is against progressives on the issues anyway, right? And so, like, this anti-woke sort of tear that he's on is not coming from a place that we're coming from, which is, hey, listen, we're trying to get everyone's student debt canceled, and you idiots are getting in the way talking about transgender bathrooms. So why don't you just, you know, cool it with that shit so we could get people health care, debt cancellation, all these things. And she's right to say that that's not where Bill Maher is coming from. He's against you anyway on a lot of the issues that matter, because what the framing of this whole sort of panel is, and what it's responding to, is the idea that the wokesters are front and center in terms of Democratic Party politics, right? And what they go on to say, but what she sort of touches on there, and I think is true, is that even if you took away all the woke shit, Bill Maher is against you in substance on a lot of the things that matter. We did a segment a couple of weeks ago, did really well. Bill Maher says, oh, Bo, he canceled $10,000 to $20,000 of people's student debt. A lot of people are very pissed off about that, right? And so, you know, he was against that. So he's against student debt cancellation. So here's the point that I think she sort of, not that she makes it, not that she nails it, but I think she hints at it.
She doesn't really frame it the way that you're describing it, or I'd be all about it.
Right. But yeah, absolutely, sure. But the important thing here is when we're talking about, is this a media creation, right? Or is this something that is actually prevalent in Democratic Party politics? The problem with Democrats is not that they are wokesters. The problem with Democrats is that they are very often upstaged by the wokesters. And the reason they're upstaged by the wokesters so often is because they stand for nothing. And so when you stand for nothing, the only action left of center is coming from the woke mob. If you notice, over the past few years, right? Over the past few years, when have Democrats gotten polling bounces? When have they fared well? There have been really three major instances of this. The first was COVID, right? When people thought, okay, Donald Trump is going to get us all killed of COVID. We're never going to be able to go into a supermarket without a mask on until this guy is out of office. So they supported Joe Biden. You saw Biden's poll numbers increase, and Biden ended up winning. The second would be the Roe overturn. When Roe versus Wade was overturned, not that the Democrats did anything to really earn this polling bounce, but the point is, just like with COVID, people saw that they had a material interest in voting Democrat because they say, okay, now that Roe versus Wade is overturned, we have a material interest. Our lives are going to be materially better if we support Democrats over the GOP. And so their polling numbers went up. The third time their polling numbers went up was something that the Democrats did earn to an extent, which is when Joe Biden canceled student debt. Now you had a bunch of young people.
He's going to. We'll see.
Right. Well, you know, he signed on the dotted line, right? Mm-hmm. Now you have people, okay, I owed $19,000 and I went to school on a Pell Grant. Now I owe zero. That's, again, people seeing, wow, voting for Democrats or electing Democrats comes with a material incentive to make my life better. But I just mentioned three instances over the last, 6 years? It happens so rarely that people think it is in their material interest to support Democrats, right? Because the Democrats never, or hardly ever, I mean, really, this student debt thing was really the only one of those three instances I just mentioned where the Democrats actually did anything to earn the polling bounce. The other two were just Republican fuckery, Republican insanity, psychotic, incompetent evil, right? So the point is, when people perceive that it is in their interest, that it will actually improve their well-being to vote Democrat and support Democrats, you see Democrats get a polling bounce. Those instances are so few and far between that what fills that vacuum 99% of the time is the woke shit.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's not that Democrats are woke, it's that they get upstaged by the woke shits all the time because they stand for nothing, and standing for nothing is fucking boring. The media is not going to cover a party that stands for nothing. Nobody's going to watch. Nobody's going to read. Nobody's going to listen. Nobody's going to give a shit. And so when the Democrats are this end of history party, as I've called them over and over again, the party that just says, well, Clintonian neoliberalism, that's the best we're going to do. The Obama years were the cherry on top because now that's Clintonian neoliberalism managed by a mixed race constitutional law professor, right? But that's all they want. They don't want anything else. They don't want anything better than that. Bill Maher doesn't want anything better than that. When it's on the table, he rejects it. And so that's where wokeness comes and steals the show. And, you know, like I'm not saying that's what Abby Martin said, but she was hitting on that when she said he's against you anyway on the things that matter. So whether this woke stuff is a media creation or not, the bottom line is people like Bill Maher, when the chips are down, they're against you anyway.
I agree with that, but it is not simply that the woke ideology is filling the void. It's that it's actively being encouraged as a distraction and a substitute for a meaningful economic program. That's why you have the rainbow flag on the Amazon logo for Pride Month, but you're never going to see a hammer and a sickle. You know, and even if you don't want to go that far, these people fight for the death to stop their stores from unionizing, but they'll put up a pride flag. They love that. They love the whole woke movement. And as you know, I'm writing an article right now about how there are a lot of economic incentives for corporations to embrace a lot of this. We're going to get into this more with the LA school district video, but you're not hurting the fashion and beauty industry by putting out the idea that you can look great at any size and you can be healthy at any size. You just opened up a market for them. You just opened up 70% of the country for them. You didn't hurt them that way. There was just a video that came out this week. It's, we have a bifurcated media circulating on the right, not on the left, but it's not a fake video. You have the head of a gender clinic in Nashville talking about how much money there is to be made in bottom surgery, talking about how profitable it is, talking about the dollars and cents. We can't really trust our institutions anymore because they have been so corrupted by a financial motive. And this is really why they're embracing all of this woke agenda, because this woke agenda is actually money making for them. Whereas a left economic agenda obviously is quite the opposite.
All right, let's get to some of the other stuff here.
But proportionality is a good one. Yeah. On the other hand, there is, for example, an article recently out in The Atlantic that makes the case for no longer sex segregating sports, at least in a kind of pre-college context. I don't think this is like a widespread thing. I don't think that liberals or leftists as a whole are out there really saying, oh gosh, we've got to get rid of, girls and boys volleyball. But the fact that there does seem to be some element of the left that is willing to pick up these ideas and push them forward as well. Liberal, I know we all have our critiques of The Atlantic, but institutions that are perceived as liberals are also pushing these ideas to the foreground, ideas that I think majorities of normie Americans probably find to be jarring.
I tend to agree with Abby on this. I do think a lot of this is part of this culture war that's created by corporate media between the liberals and the conservatives, and it's definitely being overblown by Fox News. And it is also a distraction, I think, from a lot of real issues that people have to deal with. Like, most people aren't walking around thinking about gender in sports. Mm-hmm. Most people are thinking about inflation and whether they can afford gas, and the fact that their salaries are becoming increasingly worthless because of inflation, and the fact that they don't have money to buy a house because they're still paying off this or that debt. I think that's where most people's heads are at. That said, the corporate media is really forcing this conversation on us. So we do have to engage with it on some level. I think Bill Maher, though, is not the person to be engaging on it. And I'll say why. I think Abby said it perfectly when she called him a rich white guy. He's also just a smug, obnoxious, conservative, in my opinion, who pretends to be like a liberal, though he can also, I guess, be considered a smug liberal, who just like wants to be a part of this. He just wants to talk about, he wants to be a culture warrior. Like this just goes back to the culture war. And he wants to be a culture warrior. He sounds like a grumpy old boomer who's just saying like, what are these kids doing these days? It makes no sense to me. I think there are some legitimate questions though about sports and how it should be treated. You know, I grew up being a bit of an athlete myself. And, you know, if you asked me like a year ago, I would say, yeah, I do think like there should be sex segregated sports because, you know, girls tend to be, especially in certain sports, right? Girls tend to be like less strong in certain parts of their bodies than men, like wrestling. Maybe girls and boys shouldn't be wrestling together. But I will say I did read this Atlantic article and I did see this argument that maybe we should be segregating people by ability, which actually kind of made a little sense to me. So maybe there is a conversation to be had here that's like worth it, that isn't just woke culture war stuff. And I didn't really see that article as being a part of the culture war.
All right, let me just respond to this very, very quickly. This won't take as long as the Abby Martin one.
I read this and I said, you know, this gives me a perfect out to be able to continue to work in media without getting attacked by trans activists by saying that I'm coming around.
What's that?
No, that's my interpretation of.
That's what she said.
Thought process.
Well, that's gonna. I mean, you want to make that comment? We have one more piece that we want to play there, which I know you have a take on.
Yes.
But that was Rana Kalik. I think I'm saying her name right, either Rana or Rania. Look, once again, whether this is being manufactured by the corporate media is really, at the end of the day, neither here nor there.
It's also social media. I mean, you know, that's.
Well, the thing is, it doesn't really matter.
All the craziest people go on social media, so they drum this up. Look, it's a big circle jerk. The corporate media is constantly looking for clickbait. They don't have their old, models of classified ads, revenue, that kind of thing. They're relying on clicks. They're relying on drawing eyeballs. So they're looking for conflict. They go to social media and they find the most batshit crazy, socially misaligned people in society arguing with each other. And they go and write articles about it as if it's a thing. 12 people in their basement are really upset about an Asian casting in Star Wars. It's a thing. It's a thing. They're all going like that. That's it. I mean, they're right that it is this big echo chamber. But at the same time, when I do talk to people I know who are PMCs and of the liberal elite class, they are thinking about this stuff. As that article laid out, they are swallowing all this bullshit to a degree that's kind of terrifying to me, because it seems like there's absolutely nothing that you could tell them as an elite opinion that they will not accept as the truth. There's nothing.
Well, look, what I would say is that, whether this is manufactured or not is almost an irrelevancy, because like you said, what happens is a few people blow it up online and the corporate media runs with it, and that gets more people talking about it, which means it blows up even more online, which means they run another story and another thing. It becomes this cyclical thing. Determining the origin is almost like a chicken or the egg thing past a certain point, right? And we know that right-wing media is always looking for things like this to blow up. So is MSNBC, right? That's just the way corporate media works. So they're always going to be in the market for the next thing that they can, sensationalize, right? And so that becomes inevitable. That's just baked into the equation of what political discourse is going to be. You really can't control that. If you want to overcome it, you have to overcome it by talking about things that are more important, like healthcare, like education, like debt, right? One of the reasons why Bernie Sanders, the furthest left candidate or the furthest left major politician in America, polls the best, the poll just came out. He still has the highest net favorability rating of any 2024 contender in either of the two major parties, even though he's the furthest left. That's because he relentlessly hammers kitchen table issues that affect everyone, black, white, male, female, non-binary, whatever, right? He transcends this by speaking to majorities of people about issues that affect majorities of people. That is the only way to overcome this. Going on and on about, isn't it a shame that the media blows these issues up, well, that's you may as well complain that the sun comes up in the morning. That's going to happen. You're never going to stop the media from creating these kinds of stories because the incentives are what they are, and they're not going to change anytime soon. And so the only answer for it is, like I said, you just have to rise above it by communicating to people ideas that actually matter to them. And when those ideas get to people is when Democrats' numbers go up. As I mentioned earlier, abortion, COVID, right? Student debt. When they either deliver for people or when they stumble ass backwards into being perceived as the people who will, deliver for you, that's when their numbers go up.
Right.
When they stand for nothing, when they let Joe Manchin dick them around and stall the fucking, entire, Democratic plan for 2 years to please his coal donors, that's when their numbers tank.
Well, and this is where, look, in the end, Maher is a douche. And he's really evolved into an increasing douche as the years have gone on. He's half right. He's got half the equation. He is right that, and I've argued this many times. I argued it in our last stream. We need to disown that portion of the left. We need to disown it. We need to stand apart from it, make it very clear. We're not with the Pussy Hat Brigade. We're a completely different group of people who are actually concerned with your economic interests. But Maher does not have the economic program to go with that, as you point out. So he's arguing.
So in that way, she's right. He is like the Fox News grandpa. I mean, she's not wrong about that.
He is.
That's what he is now.
He is. He's okay. Get rid of the woke stuff. Okay, yeah, he's right. But then what's left? What's there at that point? Watching Obama windsurf? Like what?
Well, that's
what
it.
What do you have?
That's
left?
it.
After that.
That's it. For people who don't know the End of History reference, that was a book by Francis Fukuyama that came out after the fall of the Soviet Union, which made the argument that now that state socialism has failed and has crumbled, that there is no longer any debate as to which system is best for people. That system being the fusion of market capitalism and liberal democracy. And the 90s represented that. And then we kind of lost it in the 2000s with George W. Bush because he combined psychotic evil with just stunning incompetence. So it all went to shit. And then they got it back in a form that they could have never imagined in their wildest dreams. Like I said, they got this end of history neoliberalism managed by a mixed race, just messiah. Right. And that's all they want. And when you try to put the
presidency,
exactly, and to try to push the ball any further down the field is a place that they're just not going to go with you. They're not going to go with you there because they don't want it. They reached the mountaintop. Barack Obama was it. That was the pinnacle of where they hoped to go. They're not interested in going anywhere else, which is why they're doomed to fail. Because you always have to maintain forward momentum in politics. The side that represents forward momentum is the side that wins. That's why it's very important to take people seriously, even when they talk about utopian ideas. TYT was all shitting on prison abolitionists, right? Okay, well, you can, if you take them literally at what they claim to be, and you say something like, well, what do you do with the murderers, right? And even people who subscribe to that will say that, of course, now things being what they are, you have to, keep murderers off the streets, right? But to dismiss an idea like prison abolition out of hand is to forfeit that forward momentum, right? One of the things about utopian thinkers is they always have an eye on the future. They're never going to run out of gas the way neoliberals run out of gas. And the reason why the neoliberal experiment is doomed to fail is precisely that, because they've already reached a point. I heard this was in 2016, as the DNC was coming up, right? This was, peak of, they're about to anoint, their neoliberal, leader, right? One person said they were in some panel, right? And, Bernie's talking about, we need a revolution. One of these, mainstream neolibs said, we already had the revolution. Now it's just time to build on it. Yeah. And that says it perfectly. In their mind, they've already had the revolution. The revolution is over, which means there's really nowhere else to go. Now we're just fine-tuning. And with that attitude, you'll always lose. because build a wall. Hey, at least that's maybe not forward in the sense that not great for human progress, but it's aspirational. You always have to be aspirational if you want to win, if you want to rally people to your side. And guys like Bill Maher have none of that. They have no aspiration. They have no vision. They have no sense of forward momentum. And so their side will always lose. All right, let's play the last clip because we're running late here, but that's okay.
Nihilism. Fuck me. Say what you will about the tenets of National Socialism. At least it's an ideology.
At least it's an ethos. That's it's a shame we haven't put any Big Lebowski stuff on our soundboard. We really have
I was just thinking. Yeah,
we need some Lebowski clips on there. We could put that whole movie on.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. I also was kind of used as a non-athlete, so very much as an outsider, but I did think, like, it's ridiculous. Of course you have to have, you can't let, I'm going to get canceled now. I don't think this anymore, but I did think, like, trans women should not be allowed to compete with bio women because they're going to be stronger. But then I realized there's so much diversity, and this article spoke to this also, that there's so much diversity within gender. So we be dividing people according to height, strength, ability, like you said. But what I think is interesting is that I think that the left, or people who want to argue for desegregating sports by gender, let's say, I think they have to be a little bit less, because sometimes I'll see people yelling at people who think that sports should be segregated. I think we have to understand that a lot of people who aren't transphobic think that it'll be unfair to women if trans women are allowed to compete. Now, I think you can argue against that. I think you can argue that this is a manufactured issue, that there's a lot of hysteria being created. But I think that you have to explain to people, like, whoa, what about, make the argument that the article made, right? Yeah. Like, you can explain this to people and not dismiss them as irredeemable transphobes, because I actually think there's a really important discussion. And once I thought about it, it's like, yeah, well, why should someone who's much taller be allowed to compete against someone who's much shorter in running?
Okay, so this is the hostage video image that we want to close on here. What she's saying now, I don't think she believes that, except maybe in the sense of, in the end, I finally loved Big Brother. You know, like I've actually known a lot of people who are still working in the theater where they started out questioning all of this and basically saying, yeah, you know, I just keep my head down. I don't talk about it. I just don't get into it. But it's just not human nature to be able to function happily that way. So after a while, you're either going to explode or you're going to give in. You're going to have to find a way to get your mind right to continue to function in a space like that. So this is either her saying, I want to keep this Hill gig because I don't want to have to move back in with mom and dad. You know, I don't want to have to just live off the trust fund.
Well, she's a guest contributor. Like they put her on.
Yeah, I know from time to time, but she wants to make it a bigger gig. Or, you know, we were watching her in real time, getting her mind right, finding some way that she could justify to herself someone like Leah Thomas competing against biological women. Well, some people are tall, which may be the stupidest argument. There have been a lot of stupid arguments made in this area. That is just unbelievable. So what about writing contests where some people are more gifted writers? Like, what are you talking about? That's competition. That's the whole point of competition. And yes,
and height is a bit of a straw man because, you know, a sport like basketball, tall people have an advantage because they're closer to the basketball hoop, so it's a closer shot. But the reason you don't, the reason you don't separate that much is because sports is a competition, right? And so the natural gifts that you're born, I mean, look, some people are born talented athletes and some are not. And you have tryouts to make the team to show a certain basic competency. But beyond that, you don't divide sports into like the super advanced, because then every high school is going to have 5 football teams now, and every game is going to end in a tie because you're pairing people with you're pairing teams together based on their talent level, their skill level. The whole point is it's a competition, and may the best team win. That's what sports is.
Of course, and listen, okay, I'm gonna let you in on something, sunshine. Not everybody gets everything. You know, you might just not have been born with the hygiene. I wasn't born with the hygiene. I'm 5'5". Yeah, I could want to play for the Knicks all I want. I would never have been able to play pretty much any professional sport. I mean, maybe baseball, maybe. Wrestling does break down by size, by weight. So does boxing, like combat sports do.
Oh, yeah. Even at the pro level. Yeah, sure.
Sure. Certain ones don't, like baseball and basketball. I mean, that is just the way the cookie crumbles. That is the way it is. What you can't, and I was mentioning this to you before. I can't remember. Maybe one of our viewers can help us out. There was a Kurt Vonnegut novel in which he proposed that everybody had to wear weights who was stronger or faster than other people to prove that life was fair. All right, so we have somebody who is really, really, really committed to the idea that he understands the science behind this. Okay, so
put the comment up on the screen that you're talking about, because I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so Nelson, I want you to explain to me statistically why Leah Thomas was ranked 462nd as a man and went very quickly to number 1 as a woman. I want you to explain that to me. And I also want you to tell me, okay, theoretically, if tomorrow Dwayne Johnson decides he identifies as a woman and wants to get in a cage and beat the shit out of women, I want you to tell me he's not going to have any advantage. I want you to tell me that with a straight face. So, yeah, all I can say to that is, that's a big part of what Bill Maher is actually talking about. And it is not good for the left.
Please clap.